We will start. A very good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the CITBA lecture series number two. And today, the topic of our series is actually on social media influencer beyond influencing consumption. And we are very happy to have Dr. Ong Yi Xuan, all the way from Hokkaido, who will be presenting to us on this topic. But before we go into the lecture proper, as always, let me do some of the announcements. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded for publicity purposes. And if you have any question that you would like to ask, there's always a Q&A function that you can locate on your screen, and that is the place where you key in your questions. So all the Q&A will be handled at the end of the presentation, and as far as possible, we try to answer all the questions. But however, if there's an overwhelming response and we may have time constraint, so we seek your understanding if we couldn't answer all of them. At the end of the day, there will also be a satisfaction poll and a survey where we would like to hear from you on how we can improve for future webinars. And if there's any technical issues that you are facing during the webinar session, there is always a chat button that you can use. And we have our events team actually standing by to help. So right now, let me introduce Dr. Ong Yi Xuan. And Dr. Ong Yi Xuan actually is from the Hokkaido University in Japan. He's currently the lecturer in the research faculty of media and communication. So prior to this, he was actually a research fellow in NTU in the Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information. So Yi Xuan's research interest has always been on social media, influencer destination marketing, generation differences of consumers in the digital age, digital nomads, exploring the role of social media for crisis communication and recovery, and her focus is really to illuminate the attitudes and decision-making process of the audiences. And her insight actually has enabled local organizations to understand target audiences and heighten their satisfaction through better communication. So she also serves as a key member on the Southeast Asia Research Academy. She's also on the editorial boards for several journals such as the Journal of Tourism Future, International Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Administration, and she's also a regular reviewer for top tourism journals such as Tourism Management Perspective, as well as for Journal of Consumer Behavior. So without further delay, let me welcome Yi Xuan to take over the lecture. Yi Xuan, over to you.
Hi, Kim Lim. Thank you so much for the really kind and warm presentation. Okay, I'll just share my screen quickly. Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome from Hokkaido University, Japan. I'm actually also a Singaporean. It's just that I've been in Japan for 7 years, went back to Singapore, and then came back here to be a lecturer instead of student this time. So as what Kim Lim has mentioned earlier, I'm here to present on social media influencers, how they have been actually influencing us through the years, not just during the digital age, but also beyond. Right. So here are today's contents. First, I will try to share something about myself to give a bit of positionality and how it actually relates to my research. Then I will also talk about influencer marketing then and how what it's like with the recent research focus and also its future trends. Then we'll have time for question and answers. Okay, so just a bit about myself. I mentioned just now, I'm also a born and bred Singaporean. Did my bachelor's in Singapore, then worked in a marketing executive for in a publishing firm for 2 years before I was tired of the corporate world, and then I was like thinking, okay, maybe I shall go back and study again. I'm really lucky to get a scholarship to be able to come to Hokkaido University, met the right professors right and did my master's and PhD on international media communications and tourism studies. So during then, my research focus was on social media influence and destination marketing. And then during my PhD, COVID hit. So I have to do something different. Like how is influencers still relevant during COVID-19? Um, After my PhD, I went back to Singapore, did a postdoc at NTU, and I was doing something related to risk communications and COVID-19 pandemic and the COVID-19 pandemic. Just this year, April, I came back to Hokkaido University as a lecturer at the research faculty of media and communications. So, these are the three main research focus. So number one, it's the impacts of social media influencer destination marketing, how influencers has been actually powerful in deciding our travel behaviors. Number two, it's also about health communication and preventive behaviors during COVID-19. Also, because right now we've been living in a world that has a lot of different disasters, crises happening here and there at any time. So, how the effects of crises and disasters would actually impact on destination image and how influencers could actually restore the destination image for us so that we could go and travel at that destination again. So, I'm not sure if you guys are able to comment on the chat box, but let's have a raise of hands, or you could just put a poll on which one is being more persuasive. So you have A, user on TripAdvisor, and B, an influencer on Instagram. So which of the content here is actually more persuasive to you? They're actually marketing or showing the same destination in Japan. So just a quick poll to see.
You can type your choice in the chat box, the webinar chat, on whether is the TripAdvisor more influential or the other one on the right.
So TripAdvisor is A, Instagram is B.
It says the poll is not showing. Yeah. Okay, I think it's
Uh,
there. Okay, let me launch the poll. Okay, you should able to see the poll now. There we are. Yishan, are you able to see the result of the poll at your end? If not, I will share with you. I'll keep it a secret for now.
sure. You could keep it a secret first. Um, I shall start convincing everyone.
Yeah,
Okay.
it seems like quite obvious one is leading than the other.
Right. So I'm not sure about the current poll answers, but when I asked this to my students in Japan, most of them chose the Instagram one because number one, they want to actually take the same photos like her. Okay, so how do we understand influencer marketing? Is it someone with a lot of followers, Is it someone who can recommend something truthfully to us? Maybe someone that's credible to you, or someone that's knowledgeable and able to influence their followers. If that's the case, then I would say that almost everyone is an influencer, right? So let's go a bit further back about like what we think social media influencers are. So when the digital space started developing, a lot of users started creating our own content. So those are known as user-generated content. Then people who started building their own content, they actually built their own credibility and accumulate a lot of followers. So that was like the really early form of social media influencers. Then we have, how is it social media influencers different from opinion leaders, right? So social media influencers actually take the perspective of a consumer and they use their own soft power to actually steer the followers to a certain action, right? So I have to mention that I'm actually a millennial. So most of the influencers that I follow are actually millennial influencers. So it could be like Drea Chong or Xia Xue or Christabel or Betty Weddy Jetty that she's known for. And then we actually see that there's an effect of SMI or influences on brand building and also marketing effectiveness. So there is actually a need to understand how social media influencers are actually effective in different kinds of marketing, especially on my topic, it's on destinations. So let's go back even further on the changing definitions of influencers. So actually, influencers came from this idea known as opinion leaders from the two-step flow theory that's being introduced by Katz and Lazarsfeld in 1960s. So opinion leaders, they are actually people who receive information and they collate different information from all the different media. After they collate the information, they actually spread based on their understanding to people around them, right? So that's the very first form of influences in the 1960s. That was actually related to political or presidential election in the 1960s for US. After that, we move on a bit further down. We have these people called early adopters that are being mentioned in Rogers' diffusion model of innovation. So, for example, everyone, and this concept is actually still used right now. So, for example, recently iPhone 16 has been launched, right? So early adopters are actually people that Apple would invite to their launch, and then people who are invited to their launch would actually start posting news about the new iPhone 16, the new AirPods Max and Pro, and the new MacBooks, right? So these people are early adopters as they are the first group of people who adopted the new innovation. Then in the 1980s, you have people known as the influentials. Something similar to influencers, but then a bit different because they are people who are in the higher SES. Then in 2000s, when digital age began, you have people who are bloggers and micro celebrities. So they are famous because of their own content, their blogs. So people like Xia Xue, who actually started out as a blogger, right? And influenced a lot of people in, say, beauty or in travel or in consumption. Then in 2010s, when social media started booming, people using Facebook, Instagram, then now TikTok. You have people who are actually really, really active on social media and they produce their own content and their content is actually proven to influence people's decision making. It could be something as simple as deciding where you eat for lunch or where you have dinner later, right? Um, Then right now, with the rise of AIs and generative AI, you have new influencers who are actually virtual influencers. Um, they might take the form of humans, or they could even take the form of robots, cute characters, cute mascots. And these virtual influencers are actually being foreseen as a new power within the influencer marketing scene. So my focus is mostly on human influencers, and my current definition based on research is that influencers are first and foremost a content creator with a status of expertise in a specific area who has cultivated a sizable number of captive followers that are of marketing value to brands. So it's not just as long as you're a follower, you are influencer. No, your followers must be of marketing value to brands, that brands would actually want to work with you so that you are actually able to market those things from the brands to your followers. So this is something that's very important. Not everyone can be an influencer, actually. So here are the current users of social media influencers. First, they are normally used in advertising and marketing. So through the promotion of products, services, and destinations. So it could be from fast-moving consumer goods, tourism, beauty, cosmetics, lifestyle. Recently, there's also influencers, or known as finfluencers, who are actually teaching people or sharing information on personal wealth management or teaching people how to fire, right? So they are also used in branding and identity building for brands. Influencers, they are also recently new important sources of information. They are credible sources of information that followers rely on for consumer decision market making. And also they are crucial intermediaries between organizations and public, especially during crises and disasters such as the COVID-19 pandemic and earthquakes. Or sometimes, recently, they are involved in sustainability and social advocacy, as well as political movements. So, after understanding who and how social media influences has been used, I'll go towards to something that's more theoretical, right? Introducing the different research theories that are associated with influencer marketing. So the first one is congruity theory and matchup hypothesis. I'm just putting one of my favorite K-pop idol over here. I'm not sure if anyone here are interested in 17, but Mingyu is currently the ambassador for Calvin Klein. So he's been selected as the ambassador and endorser for Calvin Klein because he has, the eight packs, which is really attractive. Also want to leverage on his followers so that, people would buy Calvin Klein because of him, right? So the brand choosing the right influencer is a matchup hypothesis. It must be matching so that it increases the credibility of both the influencer as well as the brand. However, I'm not sure if you know this cute character called Chikawa. So this cute character Chikawa is really famous right now in Japan. So if Sunny Mingyu collaborates with Chikawa to sell or promote seasonal produce in Japan, it doesn't match his personality or it doesn't match his looks, right? So by not matching between the brand and the influencer, it would eventually lead to problems or negative impacts on both the brand and the influencer's credibility. So it's important for brands to choose the right influencers as well as for the influencers to collaborate with the right brands that are actually matched to the identity and image that they have built so that the credibility stays. Right. The next theory is known as the source credibility model. First introduced by Ohanian 1990s. So source credibility model has three main components: trustworthiness, attractiveness, and expertise. A lot of research related to influencer marketing actually use source credibility model to evaluate the effectiveness of social media influencers. And this model has been actually proven to be effective and showed that when an influencer has higher source credibility, it would actually lead to positive attitude or brand image, and it will also lead to greater intention, purchase intention, and behavior towards a certain consumer behavior. So influencers and influencer marketing research actually kickstarted in 2010s or 2011. Then you slowly evolve into how influencer has been used in different kinds of industry, especially in tourism. So number one, they are important travel information sources. They are influential in travel decision making, and they actually positively affect how people see a certain destination and the travel intention towards the destination that they market. But the problem with research is that mainly most research uses the source credibility model as the main evaluating variable for most studies, right? So number one, there's a gap in evaluating evaluating the impacts of SMI content. So I would like to quickly share. Let me go through this quickly. Quickly share my PhD research, right? So instead of just focusing on the person itself, I'm not just focusing on the person, but also the importance of the content that the influencer actually produces. Because number one, as I mentioned in my definition, first and foremost, influencers are a content creator, right? So how they actually produce content, their content actually plays an important part in the effectiveness of influencer marketing. So instead of just focusing on source credibility model that most people have been using, I actually use a dual root model. So why is it dual root? Because number one, there's the first root on after being exposed to influencer marketing, right? How it actually affects you see the influencer, like how is it credible, right? So that's the first route. The second route is based on how you process the entire campaign based on the quality of the content that's produced by the influencer. That's why there's two routes, source credibility and argument quality, right? And then how it actually affects people, people's attitude towards the campaign, how people see the destination image, and how people would like to travel to the destination after COVID. Inside, I also included this concept known as parasocial relationship. So a parasocial relationship is the strength of relationship the follower has towards the influencer. So the greater strength you have between, or as a the greater relationship, the stronger the relationship you have between the follower and the influencer, the more positively you would evaluate the influencer as being credible, as well as positively evaluating the content quality as well. Right. So this study was actually done during my PhD about during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I was actually trying to see if um, influencers, when they were posting their content during COVID-19, would that actually lead to um, travel intention after the pandemic was over? So, interestingly, parasocial relationship actually plays a really crucial role in affecting how we evaluate the influencer and the influencer's content, right? So as I mentioned just now, my hypothesis was actually accepted that the stronger parasocial relationship you have with the influencer, it actually positively affects the credibility of the influencer and the quality of the influencer's content, right? So the parasocial relationship actually acts as a positive halo effect, enhancing involvement with the influencer. And it also actually heightens motivation and confidence in evaluating the content, which actually encourages consumers to undertake a central route of persuasion, or the route that is being more easily persuaded by an influencer. And then, um, so this was a study done targeting Singaporeans, Generation Z and millennials. Okay, so what I understood was that in Singapore, most of us who are actually audience of influencer marketing, instead of doing separate routes, right, we do a two-step routes. So first, we actually look at the influencer and evaluate the influencer whether he or she is credible or not. After we think that, okay, this person is not bad, quite credible, quite trustworthy, got a lot of followers, a lot of likes, then we'll go on to the next step, which is to actually process the information and content that is actually provided by the influencer. So, from my PhD results, right, the important thing is that because previous research only focused on source credibility, right? But based on my results, I actually found out that, oh, the content is actually very important and it has more significant effects on how people see the influencers' campaign attitude, how people see the destination that's being marketed by the influencer, and how people would like to travel to that destination marketed um, by the influencer after COVID-19. Right? So as I've mentioned just now, it was actually there is a generation difference between millennials and Generation Z audiences in Singapore. So in the study too, I actually added this thing known as advertising disclosure, right? So for example, we know that, our influencers, they earn money through sponsorship by brands or collaboration with brands. And whether disclosing the sponsorship would actually affect how we see the influencer, and how would actually that affect the entire effectiveness of the marketing campaign. So, number one, the results found that there is a negative effect on the relationship between source credibility and travel intention. So that means that if people see that, oh, there is actually advertising disclosure, or that the campaign posted on Instagram by the influencer is an ad, it actually negatively affects how it negatively evaluates the influencer, and it actually affects the travel intention towards the destination that the influencer is marketing, right? And then the most important thing that I found is that there are different ways that millennials and Gen Zs would actually process the information provided by influencers. Number one, Gen Zs are actually more influenced by the content, while millennials, they are actually more influenced by the influencer itself. So Generation Z, very affected by the content, right? They're influenced by the content. If the content is good, okay, that would actually heighten their attitudes, positive attitudes and behaviors towards the campaign. But for the millennials, they are more likely to be influenced by the person itself. Oh, because it is who that is marketing this, I think it's not bad. And therefore, I'll actually buy the product or go to this place that has been recommended by the influencer. So this is the main difference between millennials and Gen Zs based on my study on Singaporeans, right? And also Generation Zs, they are actually more affected by advertisements in influencer marketing campaigns. So number one, they are negatively affected by the way they see the campaign after processing based on argument quality if there is an ad. So if the campaign is a collaboration or it's sponsored ad, it will negatively affect how they see the campaign, right? Campaign attitude is negatively affected. However, they would think that having the ad or having the advertisement disclosure, a lot of them would think that the influencer is actually more transparent and they are honest in sharing that, okay, this is a sponsored ad and they are okay with that. So this is the main difference between millennials and Generation Z. So millennials, they don't really care about whether this is a sponsored ad or not. But Generation Z, care a bit more, right? So this is the main difference that I found and some of the results that I found based on my PhD research that's been done 2 years ago. So let me introduce some of the new possibilities of influencer research. Number one, so because currently I live in Japan there's this issue on over tourism. But then we can't blame tourists, right? Because of COVID-19, when all the international borders reopen, there is a rise of revenge travel. And also the effects of social media on travel actually leads to this check-in psychology of 打卡心理, right? But then there's a problem. Because of this check-in psychology, it only highlights certain popular destination, right? By highlighting certain popular destination, so those people are already going to this popular, like say this Lawson in front of Mount Fuji, right? It's already popular already. After COVID, with all the revenge travelers, more people goes to this Lawson just to take photos there, which actually disturb like the daily lives of locals who are living and working there, right? So right now, the Lawson has been covered up with black mesh, but to a certain extent, the black mesh was actually quite ineffective, right? But then recently, studies have found that consumers have become more aware and open to pro-environmental or sustainable options in tourism and hospitality, especially within the younger generations. So I think it is really important to communicate for more responsible tourism practices so that we could actually reduce over tourism. So recently, there are a lot of studies on how influencers are actually being used for sustainable consumption. So studies have found that influencers are effective in motivating sustainable consumption. They raise awareness and intention to adopt pro-environmental behaviors, especially through parasocial relationship with the followers, right? However, there are also people who are skeptical towards this kind of communication. They would think that this influencer must be fake for like, trying to be more sustainable or try to raise awareness on eco-friendliness. So there's a new way to actually evaluate the effectiveness of influencers right now. So just now, I actually shared that a lot of research used to use source credibility model to evaluate the effectiveness of an influencer, right? But right now, there are new ways or new models that are being proposed, and one of them is using perceived authenticity. So perceived authenticity includes sincerity, expertise, uniqueness, truthful endorsement, and visibility. So you could say that it is slightly more catered towards influencers that we know now, like how sincere they are in marketing, certain things, their expertise in an area, how unique they are in their content, and what are their USP, their unique selling point. Are they truthful in doing different endorsement, and their self-disclosure, which is covered under visibility. So one of my new research objectives is to just understand whether influencers and their message, right, their influencer message and advertising disclosure actually affects consumers' perceived authenticity of them marketing for sustainable tourism, and to understand how message type would affect effectiveness of sustainable tourism, and again, to identify any generational differences within the audiences of influencer marketing. Right, so this is my new conceptual framework. So instead of just purely asking different questions, I actually did an experiment with a fictitious Instagram handle, right? You see here, there are like 4 different messages. So there are 4 different groups, right? Then one talks about over-tourism, and then one doesn't talk about over-tourism. So I actually sent that out to people in Japan as well as people in Southeast Asia to understand how this different content will actually affect their responses and their travel behaviors after that. This project is still undergoing. I'm still analyzing the results, but I would say that it is pretty interesting. Based on the results that I've actually gotten in Japan, people would think that if you talk about over-tourism, they would actually see the influencer as less authentic, less sincere, and that the endorsement is not as truthful. So that's the results that I've gotten from Japan, right? And there's also a difference between Generation Zs and millennials in Japan. So interestingly, Generation Z, they are more interested in the uniqueness of the influencer, right? So if they think that, this influencer is trying to be more ethical, more sustainable, and then and he or she is talking about sustainable tourism, this actually raises the uniqueness, how they would perceive this influencer as more unique than the millennials, right? So this is some preliminary findings that I found in Japan. So there's also a new possibility of influencers, especially used for post-disaster communication. So based on this image that you see on the screen, recently or last year, Fukushima was like trying to release the waste nuclear waters from the nuclear power plant due to the earthquake in 2011, right? So all the media is showing, oh, Fukushima is being like, really dull, affected badly by nuclear waste. No one wants to go there. But actually, a lot of influencers, they are living in Japan. They are trying to subvert or help us rethink how Fukushima actually is. Because Fukushima is actually a really big state or big prefecture within Japan. Um, it's not only um, filled with nuclear waste, but then there are a lot of really beautiful places that are actually not affected. And the influencers are trying to their best to actually reintroduce the good points of Fukushima to a lot of other people. I mean, I've been to Fukushima myself. I don't see there's any changes in my body. Um, there are really pretty cherry blossoms, good food in Fukushima. So this is one thing that we could actually see or future trends of how influencers they are being useful for post-disaster communication. Another possibility is how influencers they are being applied into new contexts. So influencers in health communication, for example, in trying to increase vaccine uptake during COVID-19, right? To prevent or dismiss fake news and misinformation. So while there have been no research on the use of influencers or the application of influencers into new contexts, I feel that there are possibilities and future trends that we should take note of. Or if you guys are actually interested in doing research in influencers, here are some new research gaps that people or you guys could consider. Then, as I mentioned just now, the rise of finance influencer on the path to FIRE, like financial independence and retire early. How would influencer actually help young people develop proper financial well-being? But then recently, Straits Times have actually posted this new article that finfluencers should actually undergo certain form of certification or abide certain rules if they are trying to share and be accurate in sharing different information on finance, on personal finance management, right? So feel free to let me know if you think that influencers could be also applied into other new contexts. And next, so there is a new possibility of research or this new research stream on virtual influencers. So virtual influencers are computer generated or AI influencers who have a huge following. So as you can see on Instagram, TikTok, these virtual influencers, they have 3.4 million followers or like almost 500,000 followers. Even more than human influencers, right? So virtual influencers, they can be either human-like or non-human-like. They are actually visually presented to be really interactive. And based on current studies, they are perceived by audiences as more realistic and more authentic. But then there are different studies with different results on the effectiveness between human influencers and virtual influencers. So this is also a possible research stream or research trend that we will see for influencer marketing. So in conclusion, there are different possibilities for influencer marketing, or maybe not marketing, I would say for influencer communication, right? It's not just for influencer marketing in consumer behavior, but there are also different future possibilities for different purposes, like personal well-being, social advocacy, post-disaster restoration, or something that could be more towards ethical consumption as well. And that's all for my presentation. And I look forward to any questions and answers from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ong. I think it's a very, very insightful presentation that he has shared on her research background of a social media influencer. I think questions are coming in, which is good, so keep them coming. But I think before I address the audience questions, I just has one or two questions on mine just to
Mm,
clarify some of what I think. I think that social media influencer is getting more and more prominent, not just with the new generation of consumers. I even see some of the influencers who are not so young. They are, they are idol themselves, maybe a couple of years back, and they are also coming out to be a media influencer by themselves. So, but their target customers or consumers will be very much different. It'll be likely the Generation X, maybe or even the boomers. So in terms of their approach, um, using some of the models that you shared, let's say source credibility, which I know that may not be the most recent one, but using that as an example, how do you think their approach will differ compared to targeting the older generations versus the more recent one?
okay, thank you very much for that question. It's really interesting. And I'm actually really excited to see that there are like different influences for different age groups. So I think one way in their approach that I would say that it's really important is the choice of medium that they use. So for example, if I'm targeting Gen Zs, most likely I will actually use TikTok, right, for influencers. If I'm targeting millennials, I'll probably be using Instagram. If I'm targeting X and boomers, then okay, probably Facebook Live or Facebook or even WhatsApp, right? So number one is medium. Then number two is understanding the different needs um, of their target audiences, right? So if it's for Generation Z, like I've mentioned just now, based on my research, they would probably use content, use really interesting or unique content to market something that could actually attract the attention of Generation Z, right? But for millennials, they are more on to the interaction and the relationship building. So for millennials, the people that we follow are actually people that we've been following since we were young. So like since in the early 2010s, we keep following them. There is this like rapport and relationship that actually is effective, and it's an approach that probably brands could take on because like the influencers, they also got married around the same time most their followers got married. They got children, and it's like, there's this same similarity that in life stories or life chapters between the influencers and the followers for millennials, that it could actually help them relate better and enhance the effectiveness of the influencers. Yeah.
But in terms of their storytelling approach, would there be would you think that, I mean, there will be a different approach to storytelling. Can you share like how do you think the approach will be different? Let's say targeting a X versus a millennial.
Hmm. When it comes to storytelling, I think that's a different thing. So, like I mentioned, for Gen Z, the storytelling has to be unique so that it could capture their attention, right? I would say that for millennials in storytelling, it's more of the similarity and possibly the way that it could be attained by the followers. So if the followers think that, oh, the influencer can attain this level or be able to buy this thing, then I would say that, oh, I'll follow because it's pretty similar to me.
Hmm.
It's something that I can attain as well,
Hmm.
right? I would say the emotional distance, the power distance is not as different.
Hmm.
Um, if it's targeting Gen X, because I'm not a Gen X, but based on what I see for my parents, if you tell them it's cheap and it's useful, it's healthy, they are likely to be able to be influenced by the influencer of that generation.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I think relating to this question, we have one question from the audience, which is about authenticity. So this
Mm.
particular friend is asking, how do influencers maintain their authenticity while expanding beyond consumption-driven content, such, such as offering personal opinions or political views?
Wow, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. Um, I think number one, when they maintain their authenticity, it's like I would say that influencers, when they build their own identity, right? They personally, their identity, it's their company, their identity, their image, right? So it's something that they have to build through the different, through interactions with their followers, through the posts. And I would say that their authenticity is really maintained through the interaction and the content that they actually post every day. And also, importantly, is to share their own uh, emotions truthfully.
Mm.
So that's how they could actually maintain their authenticity. Like I've mentioned just now, in one of the model on the new model on evaluating influencers, it's actually on perceived authenticity, and they have five different components. Number one, sincerity, truthful endorsement, visibility, uniqueness, as well as uh, expertise. Yeah,
Mm.
there's five of them, right? And from what I could understand, there are different people who are actually differently affected by these components. So, for example, millennials or older generation, they could possibly be um, affected by the influencer's sincerity more. If they are sincerely promoting this product or they're sincerely telling you something about this thing, more likely they will be able to um, warm the cockles of their hearts, right? Then for Gen Z, maybe the uniqueness or the visibility, like how they are disclosing their daily lives, um, how truthful they are in the endorsements. So these are the different things that I would say would help influencers maintain their authenticity so that not just talking about um, consumption driven content, but also something towards social advocacy like um, vaccine uptake or even political views in elections as such. Right. I hope that
Yeah.
answers your question.
Yeah, I think thanks for that. I also remember that you mentioned just now about for those that is advocating for financial products, there is also this plan for them to train and get certified before they can actually sort of share their perspective on that. I think that is also another aspect of ensuring authenticity in their sharing. And I also here have a question from Sakshi from India. And Sakshi would like to thank you for your presentation and the opportunity to ask a question. So Sakshi has this question, and it goes like, how can social media influencer collaborate with educational or government institutions to drive change in areas like sustainability and mental health?
Right. Mental health. Oh, that's a very good question. Mental health is something that's pretty sensitive, but I would say that it's a topic that everyone should be focusing on because of the trends and also how open we are right now when it comes to mental health. Um, Instead of before the social media influencers collaborate with educational or governmental institutions to drive change, number one, they should have a track record to show that they have an expertise in sustainability and mental health. Without this track record or expertise, right, it's really hard for influencers to convince educational or governmental institutions to actually collaborate with them. So you need to have the track record. if you don't have the track record, it's not convincing, not persuasive at all. Yeah. So if one thing is possibly could be how the influencers are actually, they could just use their own platform like Instagram Live or YouTube channel to talk about mental health and and see the response. If the response is pretty good, those could be track records to be kept as evidence so that influencers have the evidence to show that they are actually impactful in driving change on mental health or in sustainability. Yeah,
And
I hope that
yeah,
answered your question.
yeah. And Rashid also had another question. Um, a question that I was also thinking very hard just now when you are sharing is that when you are doing the study, you was talking about this kind of study, and you shared about the experimental and others. What kind of constraint did you face and how do you overcome?
Right, thank you very much, Rashid. I think number one constraint is that I wouldn't expect every I shouldn't expect everyone to actually follow an influencer, right? So that's one thing. Well, influencer is everywhere. Um, I would say that not everyone would actually follow an influencer. So it's actually quite hard for me to um target people. So if I send like about 400 survey surveys out, right? Actually, 30% of them don't follow an influencer. So there goes 30% of my survey responses. I only left with 280. And then 280, I can't actually promise them to finish the entire survey, right? So that goes another like what? Another 30%. Um, yeah, one way I could actually overcome this kind of constraint is to, well, have incentives. What myself and another collaborator, Irie, we did for our Finfluencer research is that we actually collaborate with the Finfluencer to ask the Finfluencer to actually post um, our survey links on their posts or their stories. So actually we could have actual access to the follower panel already. So that's one way that we actually overcome such constraint. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think another question that is from Hazira, which is talking about the future trends. And she raised a very interesting point, and it goes like that. So she's asking, how do you see the future of social media influence, especially with the rise of AI generated content and virtual influencers? So will human influencers continue to dominate, or do you see that AI playing a larger role in shaping public opinion?
Right. That's a very good question. And it's like asking me to look into the crystal ball of influencers. Um, I would say that human influencers will continue to stay relevant and important at least for the next 5 years. Um, until we could actually prove that everything that comes out of ChatGPT is 100% correct. And at the same time, um, there are certain algorithms that actually ChatGPT use that we are not clear. It might give us something that's actually very prevalent. Eventually, we want something that's a bit niche, and it could be something that's actually be given by human influencers if they are trying to differentiate themselves from virtual influencers. So I would say that human influencers would still play an important role, and until AI could be actually be regulated or tell us something that's pretty true. If not, um, yeah, humans still play an important role. Um, and for the future of social media influencers with AI generated content and virtual influencers, I think it depends. Um, on the different fields for virtual influencers. So sometimes virtual influencers, they could just use AI generated content and show that, oh, I've been to this place, I took really nice photo. But then, for example, in tourism context, it might not be as authentic as a human influencer who actually went to this place, right, and take nice photos. So I would say that the human touch in influencing is still pretty important,
Yeah,
right?
totally
Thank you.
agree. All right, so thank you so much, Yichen, for spending the time with us, and thank you so much for everyone who actually came in to listen to this webinar. I'm sure all of us take back certain things, certain part of our knowledge. So to end off today's webinar, there will be a short survey which we would like you to participate in. At the same time, feel free to go to LinkedIn and search for Dr. Ong Yixuan. You can connect with her, and I'm sure she's always open for more research collaborations with some of you here. All right, with that, thank you so much, everybody. Please have a good evening and you take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.